It doesn't happen overnight, but when it does, you know. This is the story of the time I fell in love with architecture. I knew from a young age that I wanted to draw buildings. I didn't know what that meant, per se. I came home one day, my cousin was there, and he dropped off a bag with a weird ruler and a brush, and I asked him what it was, and he said they were drafting tools. So I asked him more questions and found out that drafting was the process of creating drawings, specifically architectural drawings. And I knew right away that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to draw buildings. So, got my portfolio together in high school, applied to architecture colleges around the state, and I got in. Started my first day of architecture school, and it was everything I hoped for. I loved making things, I loved creating, and it was awesome. It's exactly what I wanted to do. Second year comes around, and we really get into the meat of things of architecture, and that's where things start to get a little tough. I think I got too caught up in the artistic side, the making, the creating, the designing of things, not necessarily architecture or space. And that's when I started to have my doubts. That's when I thought that maybe architecture just wasn't for me. So one day after studio, I had a talk with one of my professors. He told the girl next to me, I see you doing something great once you get out of school. Then he looked at me and said, you'll be all right. You'll probably do architecture. But if you don't, you'll figure something out. And that just really punched me in the face and put me down, really. I didn't know what I wanted to do anymore, who I was, why I liked to draw, why I enjoyed making things anymore. And it just put me in a different gear. I'm a very persistent and I want to figure things out kind of person. And so I started really looking at architecture, looking at the drawings online and reading through books and read about the greats. And I started to slowly understand what it meant to draw a line and what that line does when it turns the corner and how it starts to create space. And that was great. I knew what it meant on paper and what it was supposed to look like, but when it came to designing it, I still had some trouble. And I know a lot of people have that exact same trouble. And so this is why I want to tell you guys about the story of when I fell in love with architecture. So the next step for me was what the professor told me. He said, maybe you just need to actually go and experience good architecture. And so up until that point, architecture was the building across the street, the really cool skyscrapers in downtown. They looked pretty, they looked nice, and I would walk in there and it was cool. I liked them. But that wasn't architecture. That wasn't the sense of design that I think we were being taught early on. And so I went on this home tour in my city in Houston, and I visited a couple houses that were designed by local architects. And there was this one house that I walked into. Immediately walking up to the house, I knew that there was something special about this place. The trees overhung through the driveway. You walk up, the driveway opens, and you see the house. The way that it's turned slightly, the way that the masses start to sit on top of each other to create little alcoves of spaces on the outside that started to have the feeling of going into the building. That kind of gave me chills because I, for the first time, felt what architecture felt like, what it was supposed to be. So then I walk inside the building and immediately felt like I was being lifted, like I was floating in the space. And I was looking around, and what did that for me was the tiny details that were planned out throughout the space. All of the walls were raised up by a 1/4-inch reveal. So you had this nice little reveal all around the edge of every room, every wall of the house. And that kind of created a separation of space immediately walking in that I felt. Walking past the main door, everything was crafted beautifully, handmade. The door was even constructed and completely custom fabricated for that house. So being able to grab the handle, open it up, and feel the weight of the door and what it means for it to be a door. Walking into the kitchen, all of the custom cabinetry, the hardwoods, the beautiful sinks, the floor, the ceiling, the heights, the different height changes that were inside each room. Something that needs to be open and big, like a living room for people to hang out in. A kitchen that might be more spacious and laid out properly so that everything is 3 steps away. That was the feeling of architecture for me. That got me so excited. So then I went home that night and felt amazing. I knew what architecture was now, and I just had to take what I learned and apply it. So rounding out that second year, the first semester, I decided that I didn't want to pursue architecture anymore. I didn't want to stay in the 5-year architecture program, professional program. That next semester was the start of actually the first ever interior architecture program. Now going in, they made a distinct decision of saying that interior architecture will not be interior design and it will not be architecture. So that kind of intrigued me right away because although I was having this trouble understanding what architecture was, going into that house, into the home tour, I felt like I knew what architecture was and how it felt and what the interior of that architecture meant. So I figured maybe if I were to take it a chunk at a time, work on the experience of the space first, and then jump into the overall architecture. So I started the interior architecture program and I loved it. It had the whole creativity side of it, of what I loved about the architecture program, but also it was in a such smaller scale. Everything was to my proportions, everything was very ergonomic to the people's scale. And that made it so much easier to be able to mock something up real quick and experience what that space would feel like. So taking that alternative route to jumping into interior architecture before doing architecture really made a huge difference for me. And I feel like if that's a possibility for you, maybe that's what you do too. I finished out and graduated undergrad in interior architecture. Loved every minute of it. I knew that since then I wanted to focus on the experience of what architecture is and what it can be. And right after, went on to grad school, did my 3 years in grad school to complete my MArch, my Master's in Architecture degree. And I fell in love again with what architecture is and what it can be and what it forever will be. This building, this space, this place for people to experience and congregate and make memories. And that's my story. So guys, this is the start of a new chapter, and I've said this before in other videos, but I kind of want to talk to you guys about what architecture means to me. I'm no longer documenting what architecture school was like, maybe still touching upon all those subjects, because all of that wraps and encapsulates the architecture and design and creativity that I fell in love with. And hopefully I can transfer that stuff to you. So thanks for liking this video and watching. Thanks for subscribing. We finally made it past 1,000 subscribers. That was the big hurdle. Now let's just keep going on, make great videos, keep creating great content, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.